Hi there. Real quick before we jump into the episode. If you enjoy this episode or any of the other episodes, be sure to give us a follow or subscribe. It would also be great if you shared it with a friend, or better yet, left a review so others can know how awesome it is. Thanks so much. And now, the episode.
Hey there, Press Starters, and welcome to the Press Start Leadership Podcast, the podcast about game-changing leadership, teaching you how to get the most out of your product and development team and become the leader you were meant to be. Leadership coaching and training for the international game industry professional. Now, let me introduce you to your host, the man, the myth, the legend, Christopher Mifsud.
Welcome back, Press Starters, to another special edition of the Press Start Leadership Podcast, Conversations with Christopher. On this week's edition, we have Terry Cook, driver instructor and podcast host extraordinaire. Now, let's meet Terry Cook. Hello, sir.
Hi, Christopher. How are we doing?
We're doing good. I'm well packed for my move, so the background is empty as all get out, but we just deal with that. I moved anything that looked innocuous in the background, so it'll be good. It'll be a good show, I'm sure. So, Terry, I've known you for a little while now, and I've gotten to know you, but I'm pretty sure, other than maybe your followers that are checking this out, most of my folks won't know who Terry Cook is. So I always like to ask, what is your origin story? Where did the Terry Cook come from and begin his journey? And where did he get to?
I can go right back to the womb, but I'm presuming you don't want me to go that far. So
it's up to you. There's probably listeners that would actually be interested in that, and I don't judge. But we probably could skip ahead a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, going back, it's quite interesting because I had a bit of a realization recently that when I was back at school, one of the big things I wanted to do, because I'm 39 this year, so we're talking 25 years ago, one of the things I wanted to do was be a radio DJ. And that was always a bit of a passion of mine. And I got taught out of it through ridicule and mocking and stuff like that. So I kind of gave up that idea and went and became a joiner. And but not just that, actually, on a personal level, I let that ridicule and that mocking massively affect me in those early teenage years, which still affects me a little bit now. To be fair, it's something that I'm trying to grow out of. But yeah, from there I became a joiner / carpenter, however we want to phrase that. Worked on the building sites for probably the best part of a decade. Managed to knacker my back up doing that. And
not good.
No, well, yeah, definitely not good. And I can remember one particular Christmas, I was on my hands and knees to kind of get up the stairs. I was doing it for probably about a week. I had to crawl up the stairs rather than walk.
Because of the pain?
Yes.
Not for fun?
No, there was no fun involved.
Okay. All right.
Although, to be fair, I remember it wasn't pain. It was like a physical inability to put my knees in. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then every now and again I'd be walking and just like collapse and fall down on spot.
But sounds less than optimal. Yeah. So you found something else.
Well, yeah, my partner at the time jokingly suggested that I should get a job in McDonald's. And I was like, actually, that's not a bad idea, because it was sort of Christmas time and I was sick of working on the roofs in snow. And I thought, I can go and get somewhere warm over Christmas. So I went to McDonald's, worked in kitchen, and probably about 26 at that age, and I just fell in love with it, which I never expected to do. I was very much, being completely honest, a fast food or a McDonald's worker snob at the time.
Sure. A lot of people are. I won't say most people, but there's a lot of people are like that. Yeah. They don't understand.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
It was only working there that kind of opened my eyes up to it, but I fell in love with the job. I stayed there for about 5 years, worked my way up to, I don't think I was running stores, but I was in a position to be put into run stores. In fact, I'm going to drop back slightly and going to tell you a quick story of sort of McDonald's snobbery. In the
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I never wanted to go on the service counter on the till because I was embarrassed by that. You know, people would see me working at McDonald's, but to progress, you kind of have to do everything. So I went on the till, and there was this one day, this bloke comes up with his daughter. I think it was daughter. She like brings her up, and she's only little, and he says, "Do you want to ask this man?" And she goes, something along the lines of, "My daddy says when I get older, I don't want to work in a place like this." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know how to answer that." And I just kind of sleeped off into the background somewhere. But yeah, it's not the nicest thing to say to people. But
no, not cool at all. But yeah, a lot of assholes out there. They don't know any better.
Well, like I say, I
maybe
used to be one of them.
Something. But maybe you should have said something.
Well,
yeah.
I did, not then, but like going forward, it was like as I progressed, I think when I was just looking after myself, I wasn't bothered. But when it's a management position, it's like no one speaks to my staff like that. And I can remember after an overnighter one night, there was one of the lasses, she must have been 17, 18, she'd got the order on for someone, and a suit, an office worker, and he was giving her some right grief. And I can remember just walking over. I can't remember the exact words, but I'm just like, no, just go. I'll give you money back. If it's that bothered, you go next door. And kind of kicked him out of the store. I'm like, you don't speak to my staff like that. But when it was me, I wasn't bothered. But yeah. So from McDonald's, after about 5 years, my wife got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I won't go into that whole story, but basically I said to them, they said, "Is there anything we can do to help?" And I said, "Yes, just leave me in this store. Just the one store I was in at the time, leave me here 6 months because it's the closest to home, the hours suit me, that kind of stuff. And it'll just work. Just help me get me through these 6 months." And the next week they moved me to the store furthest away. Yeah.
See, that says something about leadership right there and management, and not listening to the people that you obviously you ask them specifically, how can we help you? And you do the exact opposite. And we see it so often and across everywhere, not just, retail and the food industry, but everywhere. It's just bad management. And it's the reason why people leave, like number one, people don't, they leave bosses, they leave, poor management, poor leadership. So that's the same, because it sounds like they lost I doesn't sound like it. I know it. They lost a really good worker and someone that probably could have done really well for them. So yeah, that sucks.
I had my weak points, but I can remember one of my store managers.
We all do. We all have our weak points.
I remember one of my store managers saying to me, he says, "You divide stores 50-50. He says, "There's half that love you because you come in and you make change and you work with the good people. And there's half that hate you because you actually make them work." So I always took that as a big compliment. But I can remember when they shifted them stores, it was because someone at the other store they'd swapped me with. I can't remember what he'd done, but basically he'd done something and they had to move him out of the store. I remember thinking, hold on, so I'm getting punished for his misdemeanor. Yeah.
Yeah. That happens quite a bit, actually, too. It's another. Well, obviously, it's all wrapped up in the same lesson, but another lesson where people who do good work get punished because of people who don't do good work. Right? I was at a job where they enforced this like really strict working hours policy because there were 2 employees out of many employees that weren't following, like were abusing the more open, relaxed hour situation, and like they did this before I joined. And when I joined, I was like, "Wait, what? You punished everybody because of 2 people?" I was like, Do you think the people are going to be upset about those 2 people, or they're going to be angry at you? They're going to be angry at you because you're the ones that are enforcing this on people, right? Like, instead of nipping this in the bud and being like a leader and talking to the people that were fucking up and getting them to and rewarding all the other people and keeping them happy with the things that you punished everyone. I was like, that is the stupidest shit I've ever heard in my entire life. I was like, but I'll be honest. That was one of many, many things that I should have picked on very early that taught me that, you guys do lots of stupid shit. So I see. But hey, that's life. Live and learn, right? But yeah, it's why would you do that? I don't get it. It just seems ass backwards. But for some strange reason, people think punishment and grandiose punishment for whatever reason, like of the wrong people, like is the way to do it. And they probably weren't thinking it was punishment. right? They probably were just like, oh, we need to get this person out, so we're going to move this person over here, not realizing the ramifications that, like, oh, wow, if we maybe just discipline this person or maybe just fucking got rid of them, as opposed to moving the problem to someplace else. Yeah, so dumb. But anyway, continue.
No, but you're 100% right. I mean, I can even remember being back at school, back at primary school, which for anyone not in the UK, that's sort of up to about 11, I think it is. And I can remember saying to my mum one time, I was probably about 7 or 8, and saying, how come all the naughty kids are getting these treats? And it's like, you'd be naughty at school, so then you'd have that one day where you'd behave yourself and you get rewarded. But then the people, the suck-ups like me, that would behave themselves every time. They didn't get those rewards. So I can almost see it right back to those early school years. Yeah. And it's something that I've taken, I mean, I'm jumping ahead a bit now, but it's something that I've taken into what I do now with as a driving instructor, because one of the things that was drummed into me when I first became an instructor, if someone cancels on a lesson, you charge them. So if someone cancels within 48 hours of a lesson, you charge them, because obviously it's my livelihood.
You can't do anything else at that point. So yeah, it makes sense.
But I don't anymore. I used to, but it's like tarring everyone with that same brush. And if someone's mum gets rushed into hospital, I don't want them on a driving lesson.
That, right?
Yeah. But then it's like, well, how much do you follow up? So now I'll just work on, well, you mess me about, you're getting charged. But this person here that has 10 lessons and is perfect and maybe moves the lessons about.
I gotcha. So it's not so black and white. It's a gray area that you take on, right? Like, it's something that I say a lot of times is that there are no exceptions, but everyone's an exception, right? Like, you just have to take in the realization that you have to have rules that are kind of there that you can enforce, but you do have to realize that there are a lot of circumstances and everyone's life is slightly different, and there's different reasons for why things are happening there. So that's cool. Out of curiosity, has that, like, by not doing it that way, have you, like, gotten, like, better praise, like more appointments, more work? Like, has it been a positive side to not being an asshole?
100%.
I think there would be. I'm just curious. A lot of people need to hear that, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I need to be this way because of blah. And it's like, I try and push as much as possible. You know what? If you're actually a kind person and you treat people really cool, like, you'll actually get better results, right? It's provable.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating that when you're not an ass, there are still some people that will think you're an ass. So even when you're just being right by people, and I'm going to use a current example, and he'll probably listen to this, so I'm not going to say his name, but hi. He, for months and months and months, he's had his driving test booked. Mm-hmm. And I'll keep messaging him, asking about driving lessons, and he's like, no. One day when he sent me a screenshot of his bank account with a large sum in it and said, I'm going to send you a lump of money soon so we can have these lessons, and then, I never paid for a lesson, never took them. And it got so a few weeks away from his test, and I'm like, I'm a bit concerned that you've not messaged me about these lessons. And he goes, oh, there's no point now, your car's off the road. And basically, my car had been off the road for 2 days at that point. So I'm like, well, what about the 6 months before then? But we went for this assessment lesson, and I basically potted out everything that was incorrect.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And then he's sort of not happy with that. He's like, yes, but I won't do this on my test. Like, so I'm basically being completely right by him, stood by him, when he's not doing lesson stuff, took him for this assessment lesson where most instructors will have ditched him by then. Mm-hmm. And he's then saying that I'm not doing right by him by doing this. So even so not being the arse, there are still people that, because it's not suitable for them, will think I'll be an arse. But just bringing it back around to the positive side, like you mentioned, I don't necessarily say it's got me more custom, although it may have in the big picture through the way people refer me. But it's definitely built a better relationship with some students. I can remember when I started off.
And that's important. People. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I worked with a national driving school, and there was someone that cancelled short notice. And I can remember she'd never cancelled before, but these guys had kind of trained me, charge. Mm-hmm. And she was ill. She was genuine. I believe she was genuinely ill. And I'm like, I'm going to have to charge you. And she's, that's really sad. I can remember that text message. That's really sad. And I thought, yeah, it is. I'm like, no, I'm not charging you. I'm not charging you. And then she paid for another 10 hours or something and continued lessons with me. She might have gone somewhere else otherwise. And it's to me, it's looking after the good people. And that doesn't mean ditching the bad people. You know, you can still provide them with the same support. It's up to them if they take it or not. But you look after the good people.
No, that's great. That's totally awesome. So please continue. Like, how did you we stopped at McDonald's, but you kind of touched on what you're doing now. But where did get you? How did you get to where you are? What are you doing?
Well, from McDonald's, when I initially moved, I stayed there for a while because I did actually like the store I moved to. It was just the convenience of getting back and forth from home and stuff that was a big thing. But I offered my resignation. They didn't refuse it, but they said don't have to. They said you can go whenever you want. I offered to work through the summer for them because it's obviously a busy year. They said you don't have to work through the summer, but then kind of kept me through the summer anyway. So, and then
Convenient, right?
Yeah, I think they wanted me to do it without them having to actually ask me, which, you know, whatever. But yeah, from there, I thought, right, I've had enough. I'm just going to quit and I'll work some out. And I became a professional gambler for a year.
That's an adventure.
Yeah, not the
and for a year, so that means you were doing okay with it.
Yeah, on a monthly basis, I was making
at least for a year.
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
I was making more than I made at McDonald's, and I was on a decent wage at McDonald's by the time I finished. And then it paid for all my training up into doing the driving stuff as well a year later. But it's not necessarily the best long-term strategy.
Sure. House always wins.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not risk averse necessarily, as you can probably tell, but not necessarily the best option, especially when I'm trying to support the wife and the stepson and whatnot. So yeah, that lasted about a year. And then I was trying to think about what to get into. And something I'd looked at years before, but got talked out of by an ex, was being a driving instructor. So why were you talked out of it? But what was the interest there? What drew you to being a driving instructor? It was when before I went to McDonald's, I was looking for other jobs around that time, as I said, because of the back, and I saw this advert for this national driving school. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Because I've always worked with people in terms of coaching, in terms of training. I've always been in, like most of the stores went in at McDonald's, and I was probably in 5, I think. I was almost always eventually put in charge of the training and the apprenticeships.
Cool.
And I always liked one-on-one training more than big group training. I thought, you don't get more one-in-one than being in a car. So
true enough.
Yeah.
True enough.
And
with your life on the line, you know?
Yes, at times, including this morning. Yeah, I'm not going to give that story. But
that's fine. But just for everyone knows that we're recording this on July 11th, so I just wanted to spell that out. But
yeah, because she does listen to my podcast, she'll know who it is, and she'll be very embarrassed.
That's all the illusion we'll give. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Although there's plenty of those stories, not just this morning. But
I'm sure.
But yeah, it's a self-employed job, so I'm in charge of my own income. And at the time, my ex talked me out of it because she said it's not the best route to go down. And if we go back to my sort of childhood, as I mentioned, that bullying, kind of bullying, the belittling, still affects me now, and it still affected my ex. So that what she said was like, oh, well, I'll just go with what you said because you know better than me. And it worked out for the best in the long run. But it was with my wife now, she gave me the confidence and the freedom and the acceptance that I'm allowed to do this stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that then let me do it. I mean, I started reading comic books not because of my wife. Well, it's kind of because she allowed me to, you know, and not that I needed her permission, but in a way I did, because I didn't feel like I was allowed to do this stuff, like games, like comic books, like horror movies, like this sort of stuff. I didn't feel like I was allowed to, and it was meeting my wife, and she was like, "Of course you can. Don't be a dick," you know. And it's
that's
like,
awesome.
Oh, cool.
That's great. Yeah. That's super awesome.
Yeah,
we need more people like that in our lives. 100%.
Yeah.
So
that then led me into being a driving instructor, and I signed up to a national school. I think I've been doing it 6 years now, so it would have been about 3 years with them, and now 3 years in charge of my own school.
And where are you doing this? In what part of the UK?
I'm on the border between Leeds and Bradford. which is in Yorkshire. And the reason I always emphasise between Leeds and Bradford is because I'm born and bred in Leeds, and now I've got a Bradford postcode, and there's a rivalry there. So I always make sure I stay on the border between the two and not wholeheartedly commit to living in Bradford.
I got you. Those people are probably listening as well. So,
I mean, they're no. I mean, I work in Bradford. They're all right, but they're not Leeds.
Oh, all right, fair enough. I don't know this rivalry, but it sounds intense. So.
It's all Yorkshire, and Yorkshire's the greatest place in the world.
Well, there you go, folks. You've heard it here.
Apart from Brisbane, I like Brisbane.
Wait, Australia?
Yes, Australia, Brisbane.
Okay, just clarifying because, a lot of former British Commonwealth countries, they have like names that come from originally from the UK, right?
Yeah.
So I always got to double check because I didn't want to make that assumption that.
No, and there's also a subtle difference between. It's a big jump between Bradford and Brisbane. When I realised I kind of strung them two together.
I've lived all over the world. I make that mistake all the time. I've been just 1, 2, 3, 4 continents at this point. I don't remember now. Well, yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter. A lot of continents, a lot of countries, and all different time zones. So yeah, I get it. 100% get it. So, driver, coach, trainer, last 6 years, but you've stumbled into something. I won't say stumbled. You've glided. You've burst onto the scene of something else very recently. And taking it by the horns almost. You become quite prolific in a certain space, a space that we might be in right now, podcasting. And so tell us a little bit about that. What are you doing there? Like, you've got multiple podcasts. You're not just doing one podcast. You're doing like multiple podcasts. This man didn't just walk in the door and say, "I'm going to do one podcast," and cut my teeth. He's like, "No, multiple podcasts." So let's hear about that. Talk about that more.
I mean, I like the phrase you use there, bursting onto the scene and prolific. I'm not necessarily sure I'd quite agree with that, but I like it. I'm going to take it. There's currently 2. There's a third being released shortly, and there's a 4th in the pipeline.
A 3rd and a 4th. Let's go with this guy. Yeah, come on. Seriously.
I mean, my goal is that by the end of the year, I want a podcast released Monday to Friday. Every day a week. That's the goal, which would be kind of fun. But yeah, the first one is a podcast called The 5 Minute Theory, which is it's based around the UK the UK theory test, driving theory test, because I became very disillusioned with the way people were learning the theory, and I was able to help my learners, but you can't really help anyone else if I'm just sat in car of them. So I thought, right, well, let's produce this wonderful resource that I can give to my guys, and that I can then, let everyone else listen to as well. So it is what it says on tin. There's some changes coming to it for season 2, but at the minute it's weekly episodes that are about 5 minutes long, just covering different aspects of the theory test. And then there's some bonus episodes that I throw in most weeks. So it's probably 2 a week actually on that I do most weeks. So that's that one. That's actually doing really well. That's regularly in the sort of top 100, I think it is, of the education podcasts in the UK, which is pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
I'm edging towards that magical 10,000 figure in terms of downloads, which I'm hopeful will achieve by the end of July. So yeah, that's.
Me too, but I'm not edging to it. Like, I just hope I hit 10,000 by the end of July. That would be amazing and blow up for me. But yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really good. Because you've been doing this since February?
That's a good question. It was March. When the 5 Minute Theory went out in March, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because our mutual good friend Robin Bates kind of gave me the kick up the gas that I needed to actually do it.
Robin's good for that.
Yes. Yeah. That was the 5 Minute Theory, and that's aimed at people learning to drive. And then the second one is called The Instructor, which is aimed primarily at driving instructors.
Okay.
That one in a lot of ways took a lot more confidence, that's the wrong word, I was a lot more reluctant to do that, because I didn't feel like I was worthy. It's probably a good way to put it. I'm like, it's going to be boring. No one will listen. Who am I to do this sort of thing? So, like with the 5 minute,
You were having like a Wayne's World moment. We're not worthy. We're
yes,
not worthy.
yes,
Yeah, all right, I got you. Yeah.
Probably literally at some point, yeah. So, but then I don't. In fact, I know exactly what made me do it. It was I saw someone online post and say that I want to appear on 100 podcasts this year. A lady called Natalie De Picastra, and she said, I want to appear on 100 podcasts this year. Who's got a podcast? And I messaged her or commented actually, so it was on like public, and I thought I'm going to commit to this. And I commented and said, I've got a podcast, you fancy coming on? And she replied and said, yeah. I'm like, right, crap, I've got to do it now. I ain't got a choice.
So it's funny, you didn't even have a podcast actually, but
No.
you were like, I've got a podcast you'd like to be on, and this person who wants to hit 100 of them, that's awesome. That's pretty cool.
But it just that.
So what's this one more about? I know you kind of said instructors, but I know you've had an array of guests, much like I've had an array of different styles of guests here on Conversations with Christopher, which some of them are in video games, and some of them are leaders, and some of them are coaches, and some of them are it's a little bit of everything. So yeah.
And even the occasional sprinkling of driving instructors.
Exactly.
But that's kind of how I've taken to my show. It's, I say, primarily it is aimed at driving instructors. But my goal was initially I picked out, I think there was 10 topics I wanted to talk about that affected our industry. There were things like coaching and marketing, the health of instructors, because we're generally quite an unhealthy bunch.
Why is that? Why is it? Just because you're in your car all the time, you don't have the ability to like grab healthy food. So the first thing you're going to grab is like a bunty. Like they have those, right? Bunties in the UK.
We've got bounties. I don't know if that's the same thing.
What's the thing with like French fries and like?
Oh, I don't know.
Never mind. Okay, I had it in India, and everyone told me it came from the UK. So I was like, "This is amazing! It's French fries with like cheese on a freaking roll." And I was like, "This is a meal in the UK?" And they're like, "Yeah, it totally is."
I mean, we have chips and cheese in a sandwich, but I don't remember
it called. What's that called?
Chips and cheese in a sandwich.
Oh, fair enough.
There's probably a name for it that I don't know.
If anyone's listening or watching this right now and they know what the name of that miracle food is, which I think is a bunty, but I'm not sure, leave it in the comments or send me a message.
Even though sort of the UK and in particular England is quite small, there'll be different names for it wherever you go.
Oh, that's fair.
So
it's like the different names for soda in the United States, like Pop and Coke, and gotcha.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Anyway, your guests.
Yes, the guests.
And health. Sorry, I was asking you about why drivers or driving instructors are unhealthy, and I'm just assuming because they just don't have the ability to, like, if they're in a car all day long, right? They're not getting out and going for walks, but you are. We're going to talk about that in a little bit because you're doing something really cool right now, and yeah. But healthiness. Go on.
At the risk of being offensive, driving instructors are quite a sensitive bunch in the way that us men are quite sensitive. So when you'll see a woman post something online and then you get a lot of men saying, not all men, it's the same thing's going to be happening here. Hashtag not all driving instructors. But yes, we're all largely quite unhealthy. We sat in the car, 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, potentially sometimes when you're working too hard. People, and I'm talking about myself, how I used to be largely as well. So, I include myself in this. It's easy just to go, as you said, to go in somewhere and grab something unhealthy. And then you come home and then you just.
It's what I would do.
Yeah. You come home and you vegetate on the sofa in front of the TV, you go to sleep, and then you get up next day and do the same thing. Mm. And I think that's where it stems from. You're very sedentary. But yeah, so that's why I wanted to get the health side on it, and the stuff around mental health on there as well. So I picked all these topics that I wanted to talk about, and I thought, who do I want to talk about them with? And then I put guests into those topics, and what I found was most of them weren't instructors. Most of them were people that I'd worked with outside the industry. Sure. So when I interviewed those, it was very much a case of I want to pick the brains of these people and see what I can take to bring back into the instructor industry. And I've got some really good feedback from that. But the other thing is a side effect of that is it's actually attracting other listeners that aren't instructors. It's attracting a lot of people that have their own small businesses because the advice is applicable to anyone, essentially. it might be tailored for instructors, but it's applicable to anyone.
Like you had a guest that talked about. I mean, I think you've talked about using he, him, she, her, they, them, right in the business, which is kind of probably uncommon or I won't say unheard of, but uncommon probably in the industry, right? Which I think affects a lot of people right now as a very important subject matter and something that we need to normalize quite a bit more.
Yeah, well, I would still say a large portion of our industry is still 10, 20 years, working that period ago. They've not moved on with a lot of aspects of life in general. And that's not everyone. Again, hashtag not all instructors. But it's a large section. And I wanted to get someone to talk about that, and I knew someone called G. Sabini Roberts, and they come on, did an absolutely wonderful episode, and it's made a difference. And this is one of the things I'm most proud of from the show. It's genuinely made a difference in that it sparked some debate online. Whilst the episode itself didn't make the change, it almost was a spark for some of it. So it sparked some debate. It caused the G who come on the show. They have what's it called? A training course called the Queer Box that is aimed at small businesses to help those businesses become better allies and become more LGBTQ plus friendly. And that side of it. And they've now partnered up with an organisation within the industry called the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective.
Awesome.
To put that training as a discount for anyone in that organisation, for any instructors. So that, again, this is where I take some pride in that I haven't done that, but it's the spark from the
you
show.
Got the conversations going. You got the conversations going, right? That's awesome.
And then
it's 100% awesome.
Some other bits as well. Like another company I've done a little bit of work with called Go Roadie. They're creating a diary management system for instructors. And because of the podcast and because of my conversation with them, they're putting the choice of pronouns in that app, which they wouldn't have done without listening to that. Yeah. Which I never expected that to happen. It was the goal. I wanted to make change in the industry, but I never expected it to happen like that in the first series. But it sparked it. And there's other bits as well around that. There's someone that's there are other instructors that are now at least thinking about, but I know of one that's definitely creating another podcast for instructors. It's like that's come about. Well, they've specifically told me it's come about from listening to my show and talking about it. It's like, this is what I wanted. This is what I wanted, and it's happening.
I get it. 100%. That's so cool. Very, very cool. So Terry, I'm gonna diverge off just a little bit and hit one of the pillars that we do like to talk about here on Conversation Christopher and the Press Start Leadership Podcast, which is leadership. And I always like to ask everyone, how do you define good leadership? We've all experienced poor leadership, like we talked about earlier a little bit. But what's good leadership in your book? Like, how do you define it?
I think I kind of touched on it before when I was talking about working with an individual rather than a collective or trying everyone with the same brush. I mean, there's lots of different facets to it, but I think it's been adaptable and it's working with a person. So whether that, when I look back, and I've not always been intentional, but when I was on the building sites and I had apprentices with me, or I was, running a certain section of a site, I adapted to the people. I worked with them. I did the same when I was at McDonald's. I do the same as an instructor now, and I'm doing the same on podcasts. It's being flexible and adaptable for the people. So some people need to be led by example. Some people need to be led by coaching. Some people need to be led just by having a conversation. I flippantly joked earlier about the lady that had a bit of an issue this morning. In that role, then I had to change the way I'd been on that lesson. I had to change initially from a coach to almost an authoritarian figure, put my foot on the brake, talk us out of that situation, manage the situation, and then pull up and then change again, because I then needed to comfort her because she was sort of physically upset at what had happened. So in that space of about a minute, I'd had to take 3 different approaches to manage that situation. And I think that, to me, that's leadership. it's not one thing. It's not someone standing there going, "You must do this." It's what there's absolutely no point me shouting at someone to do something if that's not what they respond to. Some people do, but if you're not going to respond to that, that's pointless.
Yeah, I think few people do really. I find like yelling authoritarian kind of style is it triggers people's fight or flight instinct and or freeze. I guess it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? And generally, you get in workspaces or any kind of instructional space, you're going to get that freeze response, which pretty much means that they're not thinking about anything you're trying to tell them right at that moment. So, you'll get a response. It's probably not the response you want. So I agree with you. But I totally agree that leadership is all about that flexibility. It's knowing your people, and it's knowing how to handle each individual. And it was like we were saying earlier, when I mentioned it's like there are no exceptions, but everyone is an exception. 100% everyone's an exception, right? Like as a leader, you learn the skills. Like that's the no exception part. Like you learn the skills and rules that are needed for for leading people. And then you realize that for every single person that you're leading, you're going to have to take a different tact and that you're going to have to employ all those things. So that's amazing. You're able to show in like a minute, like 3 different styles, but it's true, right? Especially in like high risk or like emotional situations or things are going quickly, right? That's a true leader, someone who can take control and do what needs to be done in a high pressure situation, and get everyone out safely, right? And I'm sure that's it, again in a car. There are like obviously like you probably drive. Do you drive a vehicle with that extra brake, your brake side brake?
Yeah,
right. Yeah. So I mean, there's that, but at the same time, it doesn't stop any of the other crazy ass actions that a human being can take when they're freaked out, right? So.
But this is the thing with instructors again, in that any decent instructor could do the initial bit of what I did. Any decent instructor can put their foot on the brake, stop the car, either, if they need to, control the car themselves to get out of the situation, or in the situation I did, talk the student through getting out of it, because it's a reaction.
Yeah.
And instructors are trained to react that way. Prevent and then react. The thing that I personally believe that lets instructors down is the bit after it. It's that
sure, the emotional connection, the comfort. Yeah,
exactly. And that's when I say like the industry's behind. People pass a driving test because instructors teach them how to drive.
Sure.
But there is still, in the UK, there is still an average of 5 people that die on the road every year. And, this is in quite a small country.
Wait, how many people?
5 people every day.
Oh, every day?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said 5 people per year, and I was just like, that's an amazing statistic. Yeah. I was like, come to America, my friend, where people die way more than that.
Like 100 people a day, yeah.
Yeah, but a larger number of folks too. It's all numbers and statistics, but still, I mean, it is important to note that these things can happen, and having better trained people on the road that probably have a good emotional connection with stuff. And I think that's where it's at. It's going back to the thing that's very popular in most industries now with leadership. And one of the key components that didn't exist for a really long time and actually was poo-pooed on was the emotional connection with people, like the EQ, right? Emotional quotient, right? I guess it's intelligent quotient, so it's emotional quotient, right? So yeah, EQ, which I'm a big supporter on. And it's something, and the thing is that's great is that EQ is something you can teach people. You can actually teach people to be, better human beings. Like, you're not born being a trash human for the rest of your life if you don't have to be. You can totally be, nice and awesome and cool and comforting and like it doesn't mean that you have to be like a pushover or anything like that. That's not what that means. It just means that you can have compassion for people and take care of them and show, help them along and so forth, and make people realize that being sensitive or having emotionals or reacting to something is not a bad thing. It's life. It's what people do. It's being human.
I think sometimes knowing when to, and this is really telling for me, but knowing when to shut up or knowing when not to, like, be an obvious leader, being and that struck chord for me probably about 2 years ago when I forget why I did it. I must have read it or seen it somewhere to do it, but I made a list of the people in my industry that I respect and that I look up to and that I consider as leaders, and look at what they're like online. And it's like there's some Facebook groups for instructors, and they're very venomous places at times. Lots of bitching and arguing and not backstabbing, but conflict.
A lot of venting. Yeah, conflict. Yeah, oh, that's good.
Okay. So I noticed that everyone on my list isn't in those groups doing that. They'll let everyone else have the arguments. Every now and again, they'll come in and they'll put a post up or they'll comment on something, but they're not in the groups arguing. And I thought, that's, without realizing it, that's part of the reason why I look up to these guys, because they're not like everyone else that's just chipping away. And I think that's part of being a leader as well. Again, this leading by example, not being the person that's just mouthing off all the time. You being the person that's leading by example and doing the right thing. So on your forum, in your place. So whether that's what you're doing now, Christopher, with this podcast, or what you're doing on Twitter, or wherever you're doing it, you're not arguing with other people. That doesn't mean you never debate or never disagree. It means you're not arguing with other people. You're going out there putting these awesome messages around leadership and saying, and then getting other people in from other industries like me and like the other guests you've had on to come on and put their example. And you're just promoting quality and promoting good people and promoting just a better life almost. That's what you're promoting. It's like, that's leadership.
That's what I'm sneakily promoting, actually, right? So I had someone who was like, oh, you're doing leadership in the video game industry. I'm like, well, I'm doing leadership and it's in the video game industry, but even when I do leadership, I'm doing positive leadership, and I'm promoting as much as possible, servant leadership as well, right? It's like I'm trying to sneak it in there. I'm saying it very blatantly right now. Be positive, always be positive. Don't be an asshole. But you can still swear while you're at it the whole time, so it's all right. Because I think this one I'll actually have to put explicit on the marker on the for the podcast. But whatever, that's why you get that check mark.
Yep.
So another important question: favorite type of donut? I know you're vegan, but from what I understand, they make these things called vegan donuts. So, and I hear you've got a lead on a good one. So tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, I'm going to caveat this before by saying, and this is where you kick me off the show, I'm not the biggest donut fan. I don't have the biggest sweet tooth. So there is a lot of different donuts out there for vegans, but I think the only one I've had is one I found in a local supermarket for us called Morrison's, and it's a fruit salad donut, and it's just lovely. And you can pick them up for like 50p or £1 for a pack of 5. And as much as I would just saying that driving instructors are unhealthy and we should be eating better, I'll tell you what, one of them fruit salad donuts between lessons just perks you up a little bit.
Well, then let's talk about something that maybe will lead to something a little bit more healthier. How do you find your zen? What's your way for mindfulness? I know you do yoga and some other stuff, and you walk a good bit, but yeah, let's hear about that. Let's hear about the healthy journey that I know Terry's on. So,
I mean, I'm like you just said, as it called it, a journey, and that's right, because I'm still on that journey. I'm still trying to find out wholeheartedly what works for me, and I'm experimenting with different things. Like you mentioned, I think yoga and meditation there, and they're two things that I keep falling back to, and I'm guilty of falling away from them again as well. But the meditation one, I'm trying to correct myself from saying I'm not very good at things. I'm getting better at doing longer meditations, but 5 to 10 minutes is my comfort zone for that. And I've started doing
5-10 minutes is 5-10 minutes more than most people. So there you go. It's all about consistency and practice. That's what it's at. So, yeah.
And I've started doing that between driving lessons. So like in the car between lessons, I'll have those 5 or 10 minutes, or I'll get out. One of the things I do like is just close my eyes and feel in the breeze. So if I can get outside and just lean against car for 5 or 10 minutes, and it's not necessarily the best meditation in the world, but it's something. And I find that really helps between lessons, allows me to switch as well, because they can be quite stressful. I mentioned the lesson earlier. I've had to use the pedals, and I've got an upset student. I'm not a trained counsellor, but I've had to be a counsellor, and
gotta do it in the moment, right?
Yeah. So to go from that to another lesson, it can be quite taxing. So that 5 or 10 minutes really helps settle me down. You mentioned the yoga as well. I do DDP yoga, which as in DDP the wrestler, which I think he calls YRG now rather than yoga. But yeah, I started doing that after seeing a video online, and that's the thing that cured or fixed my back. Whereas
Which is
before,
awesome.
yeah, it did get better when I stopped working on the building sites. It did naturally get better, but
sure. You're not just prolonging the pain and just reintroducing the injury constantly. Is there a diamond cutter pose? I'm just curious.
Yes. As for the pose, I'm not sure. Oh, it's not a pose. It's like a sequence. So
he's got a sequence, sort of like sun salutation. It's like or warrior pose to like sun salutation to. So does he has his own sequence, and it's called the diamond cutter. Oh my god, that is brilliant. I just love the positive. He's a positive guy too, so there's some positivity there. I'm all about, and I've always been fascinated by the DDP yoga, or what would you say? YGR is his new thing. So it's
YRG.
YRG.
Because he says it ain't. I can't do the accent, but it ain't your mama's yoga. So I think he changed it to YRG.
Oh, gotcha. But, okay.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and being positive is something that I'm trying to adapt as a way of life. Because I don't think I've ever been excessively negative, but I would allow those negative emotions to come up too often and too much.
Same here. I was there before. I understand. It takes time and practice. It's something that my wife doesn't believe me. I tell her that all the time. I was like, I used to be an awful human being. She's like, that's not true at all. I'm like, okay, I'm glad that's what you think now, and that's cool. But I had to learn how to remove a lot of negative people from my life. Had to stop thinking negatively as much and just try and be positive. Now, I'm an extremist, so I do admit that like I had to swing the pendulum very far to the super positive way of life, but now I found a good balance between the two. But I try to eliminate negative thoughts. I have a very strong belief that it's not so much that like more positive things happen to positive people than to people who think negatively. I just think that people who think positively have a better appreciation and see the positive in their life more often and more regularly than people who think negatively. The negative people are just picking up on the negative stuff because that's what they want to focus on, and they're just missing out on the positive. Don't get me wrong. There are some people who have shit lives, and I'm not gonna say that has anything to do with positive or negative. Like life is a fickle bitch, and it just does what it does sometimes. But I do think that your state of mind and how you handle those things as they come, can be influenced quite a bit by how you're thinking and everything.
I would wholeheartedly agree. For me, it's about perception. So I think I mentioned before about having an accident in my car. Last Friday, someone crashed into me while I was stationary. So gone around the corner and pulled up, and she's got out of the car and started talking immediately about the damage and apologising. And it was her fault, and she accepted that. But the first thing I asked her was, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, but yeah." I'm like, "No. Don't worry about the car. Are you okay?" And as soon as I put that almost positive spin on it, she calmed down, she relaxed, and we dealt with it. But that then subsequently meant that I was without a car from Friday to Monday. But I had 8 lessons booked over that weekend, which it's a big chunk of money, and it's getting people ready for their test. And Terry 2 years ago sulks, but I didn't. I allowed myself a little bit of a sulk on the Friday night, but the Saturday and Sunday I just changed my perception. And instead it was like, well, I've got a weekend off. I don't know when I had a weekend off. Now I've got a weekend off, and I can't
drive anywhere, but got a weekend off. But no, I get you. It's a good way to look at it, because I guess they don't have like you can't get a rental car for a driving instructor car, right?
Yes, you can. The problem is, God, I'm sorry, I'm going to go full on instructor mode for a second. I apologize. Right. But the problem is, because A, it's a Friday, so try and get some sorted out for the weekend is an absolute bugger over here sometimes. B, their insurance is paying for it, so then I had to go through them as well as just me, which then delays the process more. But C, and slightly less positive note, during the whole pandemic that we've been in, instructors in the UK haven't been allowed to work for large parts of it. And I didn't realise this, but a lot of instructors actually sold their car to fund themselves while they were off work. And then when they came back, they'd taken hire cars out. So to then get a hire car, there's been a lot less available for that. So it's just harder, I think, is the key. But
yeah, I walked myself into that, but that's a good explanation. I didn't realize it, but yeah, that makes sense. That all makes 100% sense. A lot of sense. Yeah. So you're a gamer, right?
Yes, I don't game anywhere near as much as I like or should, but I am.
I don't either, but I understand. Like, yeah. So what's your favorite system?
I am currently a PS4 man. I've started off many. Do you want me to tell you my console history?
Yeah, give it to me.
Yeah. The first one was a Commodore 64, which was. I mean, you could probably see my eyes go misty then, reminiscing about it. But yeah, I just loved that when I was a kid. And I've forgotten it. CJ the Elephant, I think it was called, was my favorite game. I mean, I played all sorts. It'll take about 7 hours to load up, but that was awesome. From there, I went on to the Master System. I think I went to a Super Nintendo, then a Nintendo 64, Xbox 360, and then PS4. I think that was my route.
Okay, and you mentioned your favorite Commodore 64 game. My favorite Commodore 64 game was the Smurfs game because my brother owned a Commodore 64 and I used to play it when I used to go visit him. But what's your favorite game now, or of all time, or is it the Commodore 64 game, which I don't want to believe. So I assume there's been a game since then that has made you go, "This is my favorite game of all time."
In terms of reminiscing, it probably is CJ the Elephant. But in terms of my actual favourite game of all time, it would be Skyrim. Definitely Skyrim. I am. That's still my go-to game now. In that, if I just want to, when we speak before about finding my zen, I'll just go hunt rabbits on Skyrim. I'll try and spend 6 hours trying to shoot a bird and failing miserably every time. Because I should mention as well, I'm atrocious at computer games, genuinely abysmal.
That's fair. You can always collect cheese. I think that's the easiest thing to collect in Skyrim. Right?
Yeah, I've got a room of cheese in one of my houses. Yeah, why not? But yeah, I think that's why I love Skyrim so much. It's just because I can just go on. A, I can do pretty much anything, and B, I can just potter. I can just potter about doing stuff, which is always fun. Well, for me, at least.
No, it's good fun. It is good fun. It's actually one of those games that I should probably pick up again. I played it a lot back in the day, and I mean, I was a vampire and a werewolf and whatever else you could be in that game. Mostly, it was sneak attacking and using a bow and one shotting dragons. I think before they unnerfed that, but whatever the case might be. Any other favorite games or classics that you really enjoy?
I mean, I'm going to mention the one before Skyrim, which was Oblivion, because that's what got me back into gaming. Because I was out of gaming for quite a while, and then I can't remember when it was, but I got the Xbox 360 and I saw Oblivion. I thought, oh, that looks interesting, like on sale somewhere. So I got it, played it, spent all night playing it, and that got me back into gaming, which also got me into Skyrim. The other game I'm a big fan of at the minute, I've gone through it once, but I'm on a second run, is Days Gone, which is, I suppose, a bit similar to Skyrim in that you can potter about a lot and just wander around killing zombies or what do they call them? Creepers, is it? I can't remember.
Creepers, probably. Yeah. I mean, we know what you mean. Zombies. They're all zombies. Yeah. Just another name for fucking zombie. Zombie games are great, though, so you can't go wrong with that.
But the other game I play a lot, I say a lot, for me a lot, is Football Manager on the PC, which is just like managing English football teams. Yeah, there's people that like that. I get it. It's a thing. It's number crunching, and it's that's cool though. It's cool. But it's great because I can read at the same time, which is
there you go. So you meant sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that I think that's sort of the free that I'm doing at the minute. Skyrim, Days Gone, and that.
Yeah. I was gonna say there was two things that you mentioned, so you mentioned horror movies. So I'm just curious because I went to school for special effects makeup long time ago and did quite a few really crappy horror movies in my day. They weren't crappy; they were awesome. They're very low budget horror movies. So we will say that. So just curious, what's your favorite horror movie? Like what stands out for? And like what? I guess once you say what's your favorite horror movie, I'll probably be able to guess like what era of horror movies is probably your favorite. But maybe it goes against it. So let's see.
You see, it's I struggle to answer that question because I would class my favorite horror movie and my favorite movie as different things, but they're both horror movies. So I'll tell you both, and you might see what I mean. My favorite horror movie ever is Nightmare on Elm Street.
The first one.
Yeah, the first one.
Okay, just making sure it was original because
yeah,
the second one was Dream Warriors.
No, that was the third one. The second one was the homoerotic one, which everything was just a phallus. But yeah, Dream Warriors was the third one. But yeah, no, the first one, and I think part of that is because it's from what I can recall, the first proper horror movie I ever watched. So it's always sat well with me, and it scared the crap out of me. But my favorite film of all time is Jaws, which is a horror film. But I don't.
I guess in a sense, I wouldn't. I mean, it is. I guess I don't. I get where you're coming from for Jaws. Jaws is more like a classic. I mean, I went when I was in college. I took some film classes and we watched Jaws. I mean, for the cinematography, right? It's all about like the cut scenes and the horrible giant like fake shark that they made, and then all the other stuff that goes on. But yeah, I can see that being a favorite movie because it definitely has actual cinematography like merits to it and stuff. But yeah, those are good. All right, very, very cool. And wrestling, you mentioned. Well, I know we've talked about wrestling before. You're doing DDP yoga. Most folks that I know that get into DDP yoga do so because they have at least some kind of interest or following in wrestling. Wrestling is one of my like things that I've loved from childhood on, and it's definitely a guilty pleasure of mine. So I'm just curious, favorite wrestler.
Oh man, you're asking me some tough ones today with these favorites. Our favorite all-time wrestler would be Bret the Hitman Hart.
Bret the Hitman Hart. All right.
And it's hard to say that because I've got a list of about 17 that are right behind him.
Sure, of course. No, it's good. But you mean like classic Bret, not like current grumpy Bret, right?
No, I mean like probably early 90s, mid 90s, well that sort of time. Which, I mean Hulk Hogan got me into wrestling. It was of course. That music and the muscles and the hulking up. As a kid, that's what got me into wrestling. But I was always drawn to Bret Hart, and it was only when I got a bit
technique. Yeah,
I never realized that as a kid. It was only when I got older, I'm like, oh, it's because these matches are actually good to watch. They're not just big bright colors.
There's actual like methodology and execution and skill in there, and technique. Maybe there's a reason that his father had a wrestling school. Who knows?
Yep.
But no, that's awesome. I was a big fan of the Hart Foundation as a general rule, and definitely Bret the Hitman Hart was in there. I mean, I'm more of if I go a little bit more classic, like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Again, another person who just could execute very well in the ring. Back when most people were just doing slaps, and kicks and like leg drops. So yeah, very, very, very cool. So I like to kind of circle around towards it. If someone was looking to get into teaching folks, maybe not just driving instructing, but just teaching folks or podcasting, where you just kind of, like I said, hit the ground running and just kind of burst out on the scene, what would you recommend to them to get started?
The first thing I'd say is work out why you're doing it, because I'm going to use my industry as a specific example here. So many people become a driving instructor because they're told it's easy, because they're told they can make 40 to 50 grand a year. They can work whatever hours they want. They're told this stuff, so you're kind of just drawn into it. I'm a big believer in if you work out why you want to do something. So I had a few specific reasons why I wanted to become an instructor and become a podcaster. And because of that, I know why I'm doing it. So even on the days that aren't so good, even when stuff goes wrong, I've still got a, this is why. And
That's
then it keeps you going. Whereas before, I've always, given everything up because I never wanted to do it. I just fell into it. So that's the thing I would say. So the other thing I would say in terms of being a pod, in terms of the podcast, once you've worked out why and once you've worked out what you want to do, it's then deciding, is this a hobby? Is it a business? Is it a tool to gain more business? And sticking to that. And I would also suggest initially, and this isn't going to be right for everyone, but it was right for me, and it's something I'd probably recommend, is start off small. Start off with like a limited series. It's what I did. Say, right, I'm going to go 12 episodes, and I'm going to see if I like it. That way you can do your 12 episodes, you can finish it, and if at the end of it you're like, no, it's not for me, you've still got a body of work to show.
It's true. It's always there, right?
Yeah.
It's body of work. It's there. It had a start and a conclusion, so it's like a finished piece. Right. It's awesome. That's really good. And I love the why, right? You know, there's a writer on leadership called Simon Sinek who talks about find your why, right? Like what's your why? It talks about it for companies, for people, for everything. And why is so important. It's I think it's something that more people, you know, there'll always be money. Money will always be a thing, but that should not always, well, I mean, it could be your driving. If that's your why, great, good for you. But I doubt that. Most people's why is something a little bit more down to earth, more personal, or more, you know, like, you know, I like to do it because I think it's my purpose, you know, is to do certain things. And that's why, but my why for most of the things I do. But yeah, no, I think that's really sound awesome advice. So thank you, Terry, for that. So Terry, we've talked about your podcast, talked about driving instructing. Like there are multiple ways to find the Terry on the interwebs. And I think it'll be in the liner notes and so forth, but I think it'd be great to hear from you. Where can people find Terry Cook and his awesome podcast and his driving instructing? Like if you're in that area of the UK, which again, pardon me, because I already forgot, but like if you're in the area, talk about your area, where you're at, where you're teaching, because I think a lot of people, if they're in that area, maybe they'll even make the drive to you just to learn to drive because your teaching is not locationally based, right? It's UK based, right? That's so anywhere in the UK that'll be applicable.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm going to say I'm chuckling away to myself because you referred to me as the Terry, which I very much like. I may start referring to myself as the Terry in everything from now on. I mean, that's pretty awesome. In terms of where I'm based, yes, I am sort of Leeds, Bradford, part of Yorkshire. So for driving lessons, actual specific lessons, it would have to be in that area. But for stuff like the training courses that I do and the podcast, they're obviously available anywhere. So to find me, if you're looking for the podcast, you can search for The Instructor, or you can search for 5 Minute Theory, or if they're too long to type out, you can type in TC Drive or even my name, Terry Cook, and it'll bring up the podcasts wherever you're looking for that.
Brilliant.
The third podcast should be out in about 2 weeks, which is called Driving Test Tales. So you could be able to search for that soon as well, which is Tales
in about
of People's Driving
two
Tests.
weeks. In about 2 weeks, we really be 1 week because that's when you'll be hearing this. So just so you're aware. But
there you go. So in 1 week, you'll be able to search for Driving Test Tales, which will be stories from people on their driving test and maybe even some tips on how you can use that, how you can pass yours as well. So that looking forward to doing that one. To find me sort of personally, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, where else am I? Twitter, kind of on TikTok, but not really, kind of on YouTube, but not really. So search for TC Drive. You'll find me there. Or The Instructor, if you go on Facebook and look for The Instructor, it's got its own Facebook page over there where you can find more details. And also you'll get all the notes on my guests there as well, because anyone that comes on the show, I have to be a fan of them. I have to support and endorse them. So therefore, I promote the crap out of everything they do as well.
I do the same, so I totally understand. So yeah, I think that's great. Very awesome. Anything you'd like to leave the listeners and watchers with at the end here? Pay
attention to what Christopher says. It's generally really relevant, generally really useful. Now, I will be completely honest here. I have not listened to all of your podcasts because they're not all applicable for me, but you are on my dip into list. When I've got a core spine that I listen to, and then I've got the dip into list, and you drop some absolute knowledge bombs. And on Twitter, every now and again I'll see like the blog go up or a link to, but there's also just these lovely little quotes that come up, and they're genuinely really inspiring. And if you get a chance to work with the might that is Christopher, do it. Whether it's talking to him on a podcast, whether it's liaising with him or whatever. I'm saying he. I'm talking to the people, not you. So that's why I'm saying he. He is just generally a beacon of positivity and an uplifting human being. And there's only one downfall to you, Christopher. One downfall. Your beard is so much more epic than mine.
Oh, well, that's many a foe's trouble, I see. But thank you so much, terrific Terry, or the Terry, for all your kind words there. And thanks for being a guest today. I really do appreciate you having you on. It's been awesome. So thanks so much.
No, thanks for having me. I've very much enjoyed it. It's always nice to talk about myself.
Yeah, isn't it? All right, cool. All right, well, till next time then. That's this week's episode of Press Start Leadership Podcast. As always, thanks for being awesome. And if you haven't yet, make sure to give us a follow. Till next time. If you haven't downloaded my free ebook, 5 Heroic Leadership Skills, click on the link in the description. Tune in next week for your next episode of Press Start Leadership Podcast. Thank you. Oh, hi there. The episode's over, but thanks for sticking around till the end. If you're on the quest to elevate your team's leadership, production, or game design capabilities, I'm here to assist. Leveraging extensive experience and a strategic approach, I offer personalized audits, bespoke workshops, and leadership retreat facilitation to drive your team toward excellence. My commitment is to provide efficient, reliable, and proven support, ensuring you have the tools and insights needed to thrive. Ready to unlock your team's full potential and achieve unparalleled success? Don't hesitate to press start on your journey to transformation today. Feel free to reach out directly to discuss how we can tailor a solution to meet your unique needs and goals. Let's connect and take your team's performance to the next level.